What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Parker, we are going to get into last night's Baylor game here in just a second. But do you remember me saying that Baylor wasn't as bad as their record? Do you remember me asking you, with all that this Oklahoma team has been through in the past few weeks, if this was a potential trap game?
Well, I do, John, and I think your argument held some merit, but lo and behold, the Oklahoma defense, even down 4 starters as they were last night, proved that none of us have a clue here in 2020, because if there was an expectation that we all had, knowing that the Sooners were down 4 starters on defense heading into last night, it was going to be that the Oklahoma offense, as we typically see from them, would carry this team to a victory. And we saw the exact opposite. Very jarringly, we saw quite literally the exact opposite of what I think we all expected.
I'm so confused. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune. He's in Norman. Appreciate you guys, as always, listening to the SI Sooners podcast. And, of course, appreciate you watching on my YouTube channel. Over at SI Sooners, we are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. So check it out, allsooners.com. We drop a new podcast every Sunday and every Wednesday. We're at this one a little bit late, I will admit. Had some crazy stuff go on today here, so everything got bumped back about 3 hours. So, anyway. If you like what you see, subscribe to this podcast, or if you like to watch, subscribe to my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. Okay, Parker, let's get into it. We're going to get into the defense here in just a little bit in maybe the next segment, but we're also going to discuss Shane Beamer's exit. We're going to discuss who Lincoln Riley might hire in his absence. And, of course, we've got to talk about Oklahoma's huge win in basketball. But first, OU 27, Baylor 14. Weird game. Wasn't it? I mean, offense first. Let's go around the horn. Position-wise, no Mikey Henderson, no big Stog, Austin Stogner. Jeremiah Hall had maybe one of the worst games that he's had since he's been a starter. So the H-back position was taken care of by Braden Willis, who stepped up, caught 3 passes for 30 yards and a touchdown. That's helpful. No Bill Beadenbow. What? Yeah, and the O-line played like junk for the most part, especially in the first half. No Shane Beamer, of course, who was, I think, apparently out with COVID, but yet here tomorrow he's flying to South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks job. Actually, today he flew to South Carolina. Tomorrow he's going to be introduced. So maybe he just got cleared today by the CDC. I don't know. But the byproduct of all this is that Oklahoma's offense had its worst game, probably not just this year, but in a pretty good while. What was the streak, Parker? Like 60 straight games with 30 points or more? That thing ended. Certainly OU's worst Big 12 regular season game in a while. Usually you see the fans shaking their fist at the defense. Well, not this time. It was the offense they were mad at, Parker.
Yeah, John, but let's be real here. Was this as bad a game as we're making it out to be? Because I think what the Sooners showed last night in scuffling a bit on offense and bringing a very strong defensive effort is that this is no longer a team that you can pigeonhole, right? This is no longer the Oklahoma team that you can say with certainty, if they score 30 points, they'll win, maybe. And if they don't score 30 points, they'll lose because you know the defense is going to give up 25, 30, 35, whatever it might be. I think what the Sooners showed last night is that this is no longer a team that is one-dimensional. This is no longer a team that is solely predicated on Lincoln Riley and the offense for their success. This is a team that can beat you in a number of different ways. And 27 points, let's be honest here, in the past would not have been enough to win Oklahoma a football game. Here in 2020, it is. And that is a testament to just how far they've come under Alex Grinch. John, until the spread offense revolutionized college football, 27 points was generally enough to win a football game. However, as the game has evolved, as the game has changed, we've seen higher and higher and higher scores to the point where, for instance, back in 2018, Oklahoma gave up 56 points to West Virginia and Morgantown and came out on the winning end. College football has been so heavily slanted towards the offensive side of the football, and so many teams have predicated their success on what they're able to do offensively, that the art of defense has been lost. And Oklahoma's beginning to rediscover that under Alex Grinch, and it's really exciting to see because right now, Oklahoma's defense is playing as well as they have in at least a decade, John, if not longer. 4 out of the last 5 games, they've held the opponent to 14 points or less. And so, sure, maybe Lincoln Riley and the offense didn't bring their A game last night. They punted the ball 6 times. They actually got outgained by Baylor. Spencer Rattler threw an interception and should have thrown another one on the pass that ended up being a touchdown to Braden Willis. But what is the mark of an elite football team, John? The mark of an elite football team is that when one side of the ball, when one unit doesn't bring their A game, when they slack off, the other unit is able to therefore then go and pick up the slack and do enough to win you a football game. And Alex Grinch said as much in his post-game press conference last night. He said, maybe we didn't play our best football. Maybe we didn't play perfect football, but we played winning football. And that's what matters for Oklahoma here in 2020. And that's what's going to continue to matter in years ahead. It's not how you win football games. It's just that you win them. If you win football games, you're going to have great success as a program, and Oklahoma is going to continue to put themselves in position to contend for a college football playoff berth and a national championship year in and year out. And so, I'm not at all disappointed in the way that the Sooners played last night. Were there improvements to be made? Most certainly. This was far from a perfect game for Oklahoma, especially on the offensive side. But what they proved last night is that they are a winning football team. And that's what's most important in my eyes here in 2020, that the Sooners have been able to reverse the narrative that they are an offense-only football team, that they can only win if they score 40 or 50 points in a game. The fact that the Sooners' streak of 60 consecutive games with at least 28 points was broken last night with a convincing win, a thoroughly one-sided win, tells you all you need to know about how far this defense has come with Alex Grinch at the helm in just a season and a half.
Yeah, they scored, I want to say they scored 28. I think I said 30 points. I misspoke earlier. They scored 28 twice last year, including the Peach Bowl. They scored 28 against Army in 2018, and then they scored 29 a couple of years back, 2017, I think, against Texas. So they have been under 30 points, but yeah, to get under 28 and to win a game, the defense played great. Lincoln Riley in post-game press conference, I thought he really fell on the sword. And maybe if you look back at last week, which that's what he does. That's what he gets paid a lot of money to do. Maybe he tried to do too much, during the week with all those assistant coaches out. But he said those guys were they were very poorly coached. You buy that? Or did the guys just kind of have a bad game, play like crap? Or, hey, let's give credit where credit is due. Was it maybe Baylor that played that good?
Well, let's remember this, John. Oklahoma was expected to be down a lot more coaches than they ended up having on Saturday. There were real questions as late as Thursday and Friday whether Alex Grinch was going to be available, whether Beamer was available. Cale Gundy, DeMarco Murray, we'd heard, could be out. Brian Odom could be out from what we heard. We hadn't heard Bill Bedenbaugh's name thrown around, but apparently he wasn't on headset last night. So all things considered, whatever it turned out to be, false positives, Alex Grinch did acknowledge that his case, it was a false positive that allowed him to be back on the sideline on Saturday. But there was a very real possibility, John, and we talked about it on our last podcast. Middle of the week, there was a real possibility that Bob Stoops was going to have to be on the sidelines coaching for the Sooners because they were that shorthanded in the coaching staff. So I don't think the number of coaches that you saw on the sidelines last night necessarily reflected the amount of coaches that the Sooners had at their disposal in practice all week. And so, yeah, I believe Lincoln Riley 100% when he said our guys just really weren't coached this week because who could coach them? Riley was there, sure. Bob Stoops was there. We knew that. But the fact that Bob Stoops was there, I think, provides a testament to the fact that there weren't that many guys at practice to run things from an oversight level for the Sooners, John. And so, yeah, I don't think it's Lincoln Riley's fault. I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just one of those things that happens in this crazy pandemic-riddled world here in 2020. It was one of these things that was bound to happen for Oklahoma at some point, and it just happened to come later in the season. But at one point or another, the Sooners were going to have to operate incredibly shorthanded in the coaching staff. And so this was kind of, the way I look at it, John, it was just kind of unavoidable. It happened. The Sooners got past it. They won a football game, won it convincingly. There's only positive steps to be made from here, in my eyes, because regardless of all the chaos that they went through, what you saw on Saturday was a team that went out and dominated. Didn't dominate on both sides of the ball necessarily, but from start to finish, they were in control.
Yeah, I'm also going to give Baylor a little bit of credit here. I think Dave Aranda is building something. I think he's building something special. He's got a foundation of talent to work with. They're 2-6. It's not any good. 2-6 is not any good. Don't get me wrong. But last night was, by definition, Baylor's blowout. The OU won that game by 13 points, and I told you going in, they're not as bad a team as 2-5. They're not as bad as their record, regardless of what Bill Parcells said. Baylor is not as bad as their record. They had lost a game by 7, lost a game by 1, the biggest loss of the year for them was 11 points before last night. That was against Texas. So I thought Baylor played pretty well, especially on defense. They played their butts off. A little more on OU's offense. I thought Spencer Rattler was fine. He looked a little off to me, I guess, compared to what we've been seeing, but the guy finishes 20 of 28, and like 4 of those 8 incompletions were drops. The interception on the goal line was a drop. If you ask me, I think there's a little bit of concern in the receiver corps. Weiss finished 5 for 66 with a touchdown. Those numbers are okay. Next up on the receiver list was Ramondre Stevenson, a running back. Next up behind him was Braden Willis, 3 catches. He's a tight end. He's an H-back. Rambo caught 3 passes, 13 yards. Drake Stoops had 1 huge catch on 3rd down. Man, what a catch that was, but that was it for him. Hazelwood, 1 catch, 12 yards. Theo Howard, 1 catch, 12 yards. And then Mims, he got the crap knocked out of him on that little swing pass, but he ended up with just that 1 catch, minus 1 yard. It was a complete non-factor. The receivers, Parker, I thought were sketchy. Ramondre Stevenson, running the football, looked mortal for a change, which I thought Baylor did a really good job defensively, and not just gang tackling him, but one-on-one tackling him. They hit him hard and drove him back a number of times. He finished 15 carries, 50 yards. He did have 48 yards receiving, so again, he leads the team in all-purpose yards, but I just thought Baylor overwhelmed their offensive line, and the offensive line was lost without Bill Bedenbaugh during the week, without Bill Bedenbaugh, at the game. I didn't think Stevenson was able to get any real room to run. He got free a couple times and looked really good, but that was it. I've told you before, Parker, I hate excuses. I don't like excuses. I don't make excuses. I don't abide anybody who does. But if you're looking for a reason why the offense, and really the special teams too, why they were kind of sketchy all night, Riley said they were missing like 20 guys from COVID. And there were a bunch more than that who didn't practice. For the whole last week, they were shut down completely. So, yeah, what do you think? Out of practice, out of rhythm, out of touch a little bit, Parker?
Perhaps, John. And again, it's one of those things that was bound to happen. And there's no real way around it for Oklahoma. And heading to West Virginia this upcoming week hopefully provides the Sooners a chance to get a tune-up heading into that rematch with Iowa State. By the way, that Iowa State team looking mighty impressive. They beat the Mountaineers 42-6 on their home field last night. So that team's going to be carrying some momentum into Arlington, and they have an off week, so they'll be well rested. But as I look ahead for Oklahoma, I'll be really interested to see how much run Riley gives Rattler in this West Virginia game, whether he holds back some of his more creative play calls in preparation for that grudge match with Matt Campbell, or if he pulls out all the stops and tries to give his young quarterback a great degree of confidence heading into that big rematch with the Cyclones. So there's a lot at stake. I think a lot more than the scoreboard will indicate this week in Morgantown. And I know you'll be there, John. I won't. Morgantown is the one Big 12 trip that I really would love to make one of these days. And I will at some point in time. But have fun, my man.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, how about that OU defense? Trade Pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City. Whether you just need service or a mini split for your home office, studio, or man cave, Or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from Home Advisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176 or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter, all_Sooners. Find Parker Thune, Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. The website, allsooners.com. Again, we are a Fan Nation affiliate, still part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Our content, it's all free. No memberships, no subscriptions, no credit cards. Just click and enjoy. You can find the video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. And if you're watching, this channel's going away pretty soon. All my stuff is going to be on this here channel over here. And if you're watching on the new channel, I'm pointing to the sky because the sky is gorgeous. Anyway, if you're watching on the old channel, just jump over there real quick and please subscribe right there. Okay? First up, sounds like Texas is moving on to Plan B or Plan C or Plan D, Plan Z maybe, I don't know. Chip Brown reported tonight that they will not be giving Urban Meyer the keys to the castle, the keys to the kingdom, the 40 acres. Listen, big mistake, okay? Big mistake. Urban Meyer, my opinion, the only guy who's currently on the job market, on the open market, who could turn around Texas for a long-term success. He's the only guy. I really think that what we've seen roll through Texas, the end of the Mack Brown era, the Charlie Strong era. I feel bad for saying that. Mack Brown, Charlie Strong, and Tom Herman era. These were all, they're not the guys to get it done. So Mack, of course, at the end of his era, he's having a good laugh about it now at North Carolina, obviously. But anyway, we found out this morning the time of the kickoff of the West Virginia game. Parker, 11 a.m. Thank the Lord, 11 a.m. I'm so tired of nighttime kickoffs. Whew, last night wiped me out. I got home about 5:30 in the morning. So, it is what it is, as they say. So 11 a.m. in Morgantown Saturday. We went in first segment on the OU offense to try to figure out why it was so bad last night. I said it was so bad. The defense was incredible. Why was it so good? When 4 starters were out with COVID, the coach, defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, missed most of the week. Understand he was coaching on Zoom. He was literally coaching on Zoom. They were videoing, holding cameras up to part of the practice, and they had his voice going out over the PA system for the players. What an awkward situation that must have been. And you get into the game against Baylor and, Charlie Brewer and R.J. Sneed and Fleeks and all those guys, Tyquan Thornton and all those guys, Ebner, and what do? They shut them down. It's like, where did this defensive performance come from, Parker? It was good. It was beyond good. It's December now, and you made reference to this earlier. It is December, and in the 4 of their last 5 games, in their last 5 games, OU's given up 14, 28, 9, 13, and 14 points. And, of course, we remember that 28 at Texas Tech was kind of a joke. They gave up 2 late touchdowns long after the game was over. Add to that now, remember, go back to September. Was it August? September? I can't remember. August. September. And they shut out Missouri State. This defense, 23rd in the country right now. 23 points per game, 31st in the country in scoring defense. So, Parker, are we starting to see something happen on defense? Are we starting to see like a lasting, long-term effect of Alex Grinch turning the corner?
Well, first things first, John, I don't know if you've heard the reports, but I do have sources telling me that Charlie Brown is among the leading candidates to replace Shane Beamer on the Oklahoma staff. So we'll have to see if that leads anywhere. But no, here's the thing, John, is I look at how strong this Oklahoma defense has been over the past month or two. To me, it all boils down to what they've been able to do up front. Because, and Alex Grinch has said this time and time again, any havoc that you create on defense starts with strong play from the front 4, starts on the defensive line. And the Sooners have one of the most fearsome defensive lines in the country right now, and they're getting contributions from everybody on it. They were down Nick Bonito on Saturday. Isaiah Thomas came up with 2.5 sacks. Ronnie Perkins has been an absolute wrecking ball since he returned from suspension in that game against Texas Tech. Perrion Winfrey, if that dude's not on NFL radars by now, after just, 9 games at the FBS level, I don't know what scouts are paying attention to, because that man, for as big as he is, can move and can get after the quarterback. He's a defensive tackle that can create pressure on the quarterback, which is rare. Oftentimes you get defensive tackles that are just run stuffers and nothing more, but he very much fits the mold of a guy like Neville Gallimore was for the Sooners during the time that he was in Norman. But it all begins with the pressure that the Sooners are able to create up front from Bonito, Perkins, Isaiah Thomas, and Winfrey. It all comes back to what those 4 guys have been able to create in conjunction with one another. And it's not just them. Right? Marcus Stripling has been big in limited snaps. John Michael Terry has made some plays. Jordan Kelly and Josh Ellison have made contributions. But the 4 starters on that defensive line, those are the guys that have brought it home on defense for Oklahoma in so many ways over the past few games. But every bit of the success that the Sooners have had, whether up front, whether in the linebacking core, whether in the secondary, it all begins with that defensive line. And I want to point out, John, last night, Baylor had 26 rushes for 25 yards. 26 rushes for 25 yards as a team. Nobody can run the ball on Oklahoma right now. Nobody has been able to since Breece Hall in Ames on October 3rd when Iowa State knocked off Oklahoma 37-30. That was the last time any running back and any team has run the ball with any degree of consistency and effectiveness against Oklahoma. And if teams can't run the ball, if you make them one-dimensional on offense, that's quite obviously a recipe for immense success. And I think that's what we're seeing from this Oklahoma defense. The fact that teams are unable to establish the run has forced them to become one-dimensional and has created a lot of opportunities for the Sooners to make plays on the back end. And we saw that last night. 2 interceptions, one of them from Trey Norwood, his 3rd of the year, and one from DJ Graham, the true freshman, his first career interception as a collegian. So it all begins, John, and I feel like I keep saying it, but it all begins with the front 4. And the fact that Oklahoma has managed to piece together one of the most impressive defensive lines in the entire country has set the table for this fantastic degree of success that they've experienced on the defensive side of the football over the last few games. And I feel like I keep going back every week to Ronnie Perkins because he was a game changer from the minute he stepped back onto the field on October 31st. And he's probably been the biggest contributor, I think, all things considered. But that is absolutely no knock on the other 3 guys because over the course of the entire regular season, they've been every bit as instrumental. I think, yes, give props to the defense, but especially give props to that defensive line because they are creating so many opportunities for the rest of the unit to make big plays and shut down offenses across the Big 12.
So, full disclosure, I was on the 3 hours that I referenced earlier. I was on a Zoom call today with the Football Writers Association of America. We were picking the All-American teams. The first one comes out, I think, next week, and then the one after that comes out the week after that. Let me just say that a handful of Oklahoma players' names came up today. Handful. Not 5. I think it was 3 total. And I got the question, hey, John, do you think Isaiah Thomas is worthy of All-American candidacy? It's something that's, everybody kicks it around and everybody gets asked about somebody else's players and other conferences and things like that. So no big deal. Nothing out of the ordinary. I'm just saying he's played well enough. And I made reference to Alex Grinch saying he was the defensive MVP of the first half of the season. And Grinch said last night after the game, if he's not the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, he doesn't know who is. I think I know who is. He plays for Iowa State. But the point is well taken that Isaiah Thomas has just been amazing this year. He's been unbelievable. And he's been at the forefront of everything that Oklahoma has done defensively. He's been the point man. He's been the tip of the spear on that defense that breaks through and just knocks opposing offenses down. Last night, 8 tackles for loss, batted down 6 passes at the line, which Parker, I've covered a lot of OU games. I can't ever remember seeing that volume of batted passes before. They were in Charlie Brewer's head. They were in Dave Aranda's head. Whatever the game plan was, they were dialed in. So, yeah, the totality of the season. Did they have problems against Kansas State and Iowa State and Texas? Yeah, obviously, absolutely. They had problems. When they weren't dominating those guys, remember Kansas State? We kill OU for their performance against Kansas State. Kansas State had 12 yards of offense after the first quarter. They had 98 yards of offense at halftime. Iowa State was a little bit better. I think they were in the 130s after the first quarter and 260 or something after halftime. But Texas, remember, going into the fourth quarter of that game, Texas had 174 yards total offense. They were in domination mode, and they still weren't any good at that point. Now, they've gotten good since then, so think about that. There were stretches of those games when OU's defense looked absolutely impenetrable, and then, of course, there were stretches where they couldn't get out of their own way. I think what we've seen since then, here's an example. We talk about Rattler growing up and settling in and becoming a leader and evolving his game, and he's playing better since he got benched, and he's taking care of the football. I think that's exactly what's happened with the defense too. After Texas, after the Cotton Bowl, and after that fourth quarter meltdown, the third one in a row, Isaiah Thomas, Perrion Winfrey, Joshua Ellison, eventually Ronnie Perkins, guys like that, they got fed up and they just started beating up their dudes up front, their opponents. 2.5 sacks last night for Thomas was great. Perkins was close to about a half a dozen. Nick Benito, you mentioned him earlier. He missed last night, but he's getting better and better. Agwebu and Asamoah, I think those guys are really starting to shine. And I think that showed last night when Deshaun White kind of struggled a little bit. But as a result of that activity up front, here's the big payoff, Parker. All that stuff going on up front in the front 7, front 6 maybe. The DBs are no longer getting embarrassed on every play. That's the best thing that this Sooner fan base has been hoping for, is just don't let the DBs get embarrassed. Don't let them commit 15-yard penalties. Don't let them hold on every down. Don't let them pass interference, and don't let them get beat for touchdowns, because that was happening over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 years. That was happening way too frequently, and now those guys are actually playing solid coverage because of front 6, front 7 is doing so well. But think about it, Parker. They're the same guys. They've got a lot of the same problems, but they're just doing so much better in the back end. And we talked about it in our post-game wrap-up video, but my gosh, are you serious with this? Robert Barnes, Jeremiah Cradell, Trey Norwood. Barnes was a linebacker, and before he was a linebacker all year, he barely even played last year. His last time he played was the Orange Bowl. Last time he played as a safety was the Orange Bowl in 2018. So just an incredible. And listen, it's not like he went out and dominated last night, but he represented himself. He held up. He held his own, and that's all you're asking from these guys is if you're going to play DB for Oklahoma, don't embarrass the team. And they haven't, because they've been getting push up front. If you think about Jaden Davis last night, now I will say this: he got beat a couple of times, one for a touchdown. Did you see do you think that was a push off? I said it was a push off. The touchdown. I think it was Tyquan Thornton. Was that, in your opinion, was it a push off?
I think it was a good no call, John, but I think it was. You certainly have a case that Jaden Davis was pushed off on.
Yeah.
And I will say, to follow
I've seen it called for less.
Yeah, definitely. But to follow up your comment on Robert Barnes, if you think about it, and I don't want to say anything that isn't factually correct, but as far as I know, the last snap that Robert Barnes played at safety before last night was in the Orange Bowl in 2018 when Josh Jacobs stiff-armed him into a parallel universe. Didn't even really stiff-arm him so much as just ran him over, bowled him over. And
just trucked him.
For Robert Barnes to go through everything that he went through, getting removed from that Orange Bowl in the concussion protocol after he took that hit from Jacobs, spending most of the 2019 season on the sidelines, making the transition to linebacker, and then he said Alex Rinch sent him a text on Sunday and said, hey, you're probably playing safety this weekend. So for him For his football journey at Oklahoma to come full circle like that, in the span of 6 days, to move from the position that he'd spent all of spring and all of fall camp transitioning to, back to the position where he was originally bred at and where he was originally intended to play in the Oklahoma defense. It was really remarkable, and I get he didn't have a huge impact on the game, but simply to be out there and the trust that Alex Grinch had to put him in that position when he had all 3 of his free safeties on the depth chart down, it speaks a lot for Robert Barnes' work ethic and just what a team player he is. The fact that not only was he willing to go out and do that, but he was capable of going out and doing that. And he was the guy that Alex Grinch reached out to when he knew that he was going to be short in the secondary on Saturday.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, Lincoln Riley has just grown his very first branch of his very own coaching tree. And now he's got to go hire a new coach. Plus, OU basketball with a huge win.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Shane Beamer, he gone. He's there. He's in South Carolina. He is gone. He is the new head coach at South Carolina. Flew there today, apparently. Met with the team at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Going to be formally introduced tomorrow, the way I understand it. All indications are that he's not coming back. He's not coming back to Norman unless it's to, say goodbye. He will not be coaching the Sooners from this point forward. And that's a good move for him professionally. You're the head coach now at South Carolina. Your 100% of your attention has to be at South Carolina. They've got signing day in, 12 days, I think. That's what is it, December 16th? So 11 days, 10 days, I guess, is where we're at right now. Gosh, that's coming up so fast. But, basically OU is going to proceed right now, short, one coach. Parker, it's probably not a huge deal, I think there's two games left before the bowl game, all right? The West Virginia game this week, and then next week, Big 12 championship. Then it comes the bowl game. They'll probably hire somebody in between before the bowl game, which makes me think that this week and next week, Cale Gundy is probably going to take over some H-back duties, You would think that maybe Lincoln Riley will probably help out a little bit there. I don't think recruiting-wise, I don't think Beamer was going to get any key players signed on December 16th or 18th, 17th, 18th in the early signing period. In my opinion, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Parker, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the class is pretty much filled out where he was not going after anybody at his position. There are no key H-backs out there, right, that are at his position, I'm assuming.
That is correct. Yeah, the Sooners were not in pursuit of any H-backs or tight ends, at least not seriously in the 2021 class.
So we'll discuss his replacement in just a second, but do you think losing Shane Beamer, however many games we're into the season at this point, 9 games into the season, you think it hurts the team moving forward for the next couple of weeks?
I don't know how conspicuous it's going to be, John, but I say it certainly will hurt them, simply because when you only have 11 coaches on a staff and you lose one of them, you're going to feel that impact. And some guys will feel it more than others. I'm sure the H-backs will feel it much more tangibly than the rest of the offense and the rest of the team as a whole. But I would say it's definitely going to affect the Sooners. How it affects them, I'm not exactly sure. And to be honest with you, if there was one position group that I would trust to function without their positional coach, it's probably the H-backs, because they're 4 deep with potential NFLers right now. But having Beamer gone is certainly going to hurt. And Obviously, his role in terms of play calling, Lincoln Riley's the one calling the shots. I don't know how much, obviously none of us know how much he leaned on Beamer in that capacity and how much leash Riley gave Beamer within the offense. But he was an associate head coach. He was a guy that Riley had a lot of trust in, and that's not going to be easy to replace. It never is. I will be interested to see, I think we all will be interested to see who fills that role, whether it's a guy with program ties or whether it's a guy that comes in with no previous affiliation to the Sooners, the way Lincoln Riley came to Norman. And so it will certainly be intriguing to see when that position gets filled and who the Sooners go after. A few names floating around there, nothing super clear-cut yet in terms of who Beamer's replacement is going to be.
Yeah, and I don't have any insight. There's not in my opinion, DeMarco Murray that's just out there that just getting back into coaching, that has OU ties, that has a name in an NFL, pedigree. So I don't have any insight as to which hot young assistant coaches are going to be on Lincoln Riley's short list. What I do know is the obvious, and that is Garrett Riley, co-offensive coordinator at SMU, previously assistant coach at Kansas, who had just been hired as offensive coordinator at Appalachian State before Sonny Dykes hired him at SMU. Garrett Riley, who also happens to be Lincoln Riley's little brother. That's an obvious one. He's got a brother in coaching. Question is this. The question is this, okay? Does Lincoln Riley do that? Because it's his team, it's his program. He's going to hire whoever the hell he wants. And he wants to work with his brother, and so he's going to hire him? Or does Lincoln Riley err in the other direction where maybe he's concerned about image and perception and possible improprieties like nepotism? I mean, let's be honest here. As much as everyone loves Bob Stoops right now, right, in the past week for sure, right, one thing that he just got raked over the coals for was his tendency to hire his boys, his guys, the Youngstown Mafia, his old teammates at Iowa, his old roommates, his old friends. And a couple of guys he hired, if you think about it, who were coaches who were not in his circle, Willie Martinez and James Patton I'm thinking of. They weren't particularly accomplished coaches when they were at Oklahoma. So Bob's track record for hiring guys kind of is in that early era when he hired all those K-State guys and brought in that real young, hungry staff. The last few years, he brings his brother back. That didn't work out. Had to fire Norvell. He had to fire Heupel. Had to fire Martinez. Had to fire Bruce Kittle. I mean, he tried to populate the staff with a bunch of his boys, and it just didn't work out. And fans, I'm not sitting here knocking him. I'm saying fans got mad at Bob for those hires because the team kind of started spiraling there and got stagnant. Recruiting got real stagnant. So I guess the question becomes, does Lincoln Riley take a page out of Bob's playbook and hire his brother, right? Or does he take a page out of Bob's playbook and throw it in the trash and set it on fire, never, ever, ever hire his brother? That's the question.
Yeah, John, and there are two distinctly different ways to go about that kind of thing. One is to hire somebody you know, and one is to hire the sexy name, right? You go with what the fans want, or you go with what you want, what you're most comfortable with. And there is something to be said, John, for working chemistry. And so I'm not a huge dissident when a coach goes out and hires somebody that he already has ties to and has a good working relationship with, because I think in that sense, and in that scenario, a coach is only going to bring a guy on. He's only going to bring one of his close friends, one of his confidants on, if he's confident that he and that other individual can do some pretty special things together. You don't do favors for your guys that are that significant and that meaningful to the direction of a program unless you really do believe in them. And so I am never one to throw the nepotism card out there when a coach makes a hire based on the connections that he already has. That said, Lincoln Riley went and hired Shane Beamer, and Beamer at the time had no previous connection to the Oklahoma staff. And obviously he and Riley had crossed paths a little bit, but Beamer was one of those guys that was very much considered one of the top assistants in college football and a guy that was going to be a future head coach someday. And lo and behold, less than 3 years into his tenure at Oklahoma, he's got the head coaching job at South Carolina. So I think people expect that Dennis Simmons is kind of headed along that same path. He's a future head coach somewhere, if obviously not at Oklahoma, but somewhere else. And so Lincoln Riley, as good a coach as he is and as good a reputation as he has, this is something that he's going to have to prepare for virtually every year, because he's going to start losing his top assistants. It happened to Bob Stoops. Bob Stoops lost Kevin Sumlin and Kevin Wilson and Mark Mangino and Chuck Long, and all these guys ended up moving on at some point. And when you have the kind of success that Oklahoma has had historically as a program, there's going to be a lot of turnover in the coaching staff, because guys are going to get bigger and better opportunities elsewhere. And so this obviously is not something that Lincoln Riley has had to deal with very much, if at all, yet in his tenure as Oklahoma head coach. But as the Sooners brand continues to build, and as Riley continues to build his brand as a coach and as a recruiter, it's going to be something that you see with great regularity. So this is going to become the norm here in Norman. It's going to become the kind of thing where every year, right about this time, either Lincoln Riley is going to have to replace somebody, or we're all going to be having conversations about some guy that's interviewing elsewhere that Lincoln Riley may end up having to replace. It's going to be an annual thing. Lincoln Riley's just that good. And when you're that good, you can bring in the top coaches in the country because they want to work with you. But at the same time, you're going to lose the top coaches in the country, because as long as your program is having success, and as long as they're associated with that success, other programs are going to come calling with bigger paychecks and bigger opportunities.
My first reaction to what you said was about, you want to hire somebody that you're used to working with, you have good chemistry with. Wait a minute. Have Lincoln Riley and Garrett Riley ever worked together? That's my first reaction. So while you were talking, I looked it up. Yes, 2 years at East Carolina. Lincoln was the offensive coordinator under Ruffin McNeil, and Garrett Riley was the receivers coach. So they worked together for 2 years. The year before he went to East Carolina, he was a graduate from Texas Tech. So he's pretty young. We think Lincoln Riley's young at 36. Garrett Riley's really young. It's not to say he can't coach. I'm just saying he's young. It'll be an interesting decision. With Beamer gone, it'll be an interesting decision to which way he goes. The thing about these hires sometimes is that these coaches, their network is way bigger than what we think. Their network and their interviewing techniques and their ability to meet at the coaches convention and meet clandestinely with a dozen candidates in 4 days or 2 days or whatever it is. Those guys can get it done, and he's probably gonna hire somebody that we're not even aware of right now, or he's gonna hire his little brother. Let's talk about the Big 12 championship game. OU Iowa State. It's locked in. Iowa State's got this weekend off. OU's got to go to West Virginia. I don't know if you saw what happened in the ACC, where the ACC said, "Hey, Notre Dame and Clemson, you guys don't have to play if you don't want to on the 12th." So I think it was Notre Dame. Clemson had a game scheduled. Doggone it, now I've forgotten. One of the two had a game scheduled on the 12th. And the ACC came out and said, you don't have to play that game if you don't want to. That's weird for a conference to step up and say, don't play. You got the conference championship ahead of you. Now, there's a little bit different scenario. Those two guys, Notre Dame and Clemson, are both in the national championship picture. They're both in the college football playoff picture. It's not so much the case in the Big 12, where if somebody loses next week in Morgantown, they're still in the Big 12 championship game. It's not like they're going to get, cast out of some playoff or cast out of a bowl. It's a different scenario. But still, it's kind of goofy the way the ACC did it. So what I'm asking you, Parker, should the Big 12 allow OU to cancel their trip and just call it a no contest? I, of course, say hell no, because I'm a competitor. And that's what Lincoln Riley said Saturday night. He said, hey, this is Oklahoma. We don't run from competition, which I love the way he said that. If we're asking if it's fair, if Iowa State doesn't have a game this week and Oklahoma does, yeah, it's fair, because they previously agreed that they're going to leave November 12th open for any cancellations, any postponements. They both will have played 9 conference games. It's absolutely fair. What say you?
John, I'm right there with you, and I think Lincoln Riley is right there with us. What did he say earlier in the season? He said something to the effect of, I hope if we're canceling games, we're all doing it for the right reasons. And so unless there's legitimate cause to cancel this game next week, I want to see Oklahoma play. I'm sure Oklahoma wants to play. And most everybody wants to see as much football on the final regular season Saturday of the season as they can. And I get that the ACC is probably doing a little bit of gamesmanship there because they don't want to see one of their teams go down in a massive upset. They're still kind of hoping, I assume, that they can get both teams into the college football playoff, which would be huge for the conference in terms of revenue. And so that's probably the driving force behind the conference saying, yeah, you don't have to play that last regular season game if you don't want to. But the Big 12, I mean, they're not really in the college football playoff picture as of right now. And granted, the conference championship matchup is already set. But yeah, John, I'm a competitor. You're a competitor. Riley's a competitor. I don't see any reason not to play if you can play. And I get that thresholds are different across the landscape of college football. I get that not every conference treats it the same way. I get that maybe in one program's eyes, they may have legitimate cause to cancel a game, and in another program's eyes, that may not be legitimate cause. But I do believe Oklahoma's going to do everything that they can to play this game in West Virginia. Because as well as they're playing right now, especially on defense, what do you want to do on Saturday? You want to sit inside and have your 5th open date of the year and look forward to that grudge match next week against Iowa State? Or you want to go out there and continue to dominate as you have each of the last 6 outings? I think Oklahoma, with as much momentum as they're riding right now, they just want to play football on Saturday. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter who's on the other sideline. They just want to go beat somebody.
And he said it best, too, Lincoln did, when he talked about this year especially, when you're not guaranteed any games, and you might not get as many as you normally do, and usually it's 12, and this year we're having to play 10. Of course they want to go to Morgantown and play a game. These guys these athletes, they live for playing college football right now. This is their passion. This is their love. You think they're going to sit around and go, whoo, man, I'm glad we didn't go all the way to Morgantown to play that game so we could sit at home for a week and get ready for Iowa State. That's not how these athletes are tuned, man. And I'll say this, too. I've already paid for this airfare. If this game gets canceled again, gets canceled for real this time and not just postponed, you can have it for a week. I'm going to take the airfare, and I'm going to fly up and see my daughter in Maine, if that's okay with you. Let's talk some basketball. OU at TCU today, this afternoon, which is exactly, oddly enough, where they ended the season last year. And, hey, OU wins the game, just like they did last year, this time 82-78. And Austin Reeves picked up kind of where he left off last year with a massive performance against the Horned Frogs. He scored 41 last time in Fort Worth. Today he scored 32. 73 points in his last 2 games against the Horned Frogs. He had 6 rebounds and 9 assists as well today. That dude was everywhere, wasn't he? Last year, he hit the game winner. This year, he hit the big 3 with 55 seconds left that put him ahead by 5 points, Parker. This guy, Austin Reeves, is getting to be so much fun to watch, is he not? 16 of 18 from the line. I like his game more and more. It's apparent to me that he spent the offseason working on his game. He's known as a shooter, obviously. He came to OU known with the reputation as a shooter, but dude has expanded his game. He's expanded his ability to not only put the ball on the floor and beat his man and get to the rim, but so far he's been great at finishing at the rim, and that's a big step. I thought he turned into an offensive weapon, and he's playing with a ton of confidence, Parker.
Yeah, certainly. And you look at what the Sooners offense can bring to the table on any given night when they hit the hardwood. You got a guy in Reeves who's just a pure scorer. You got a guy in Brady Manick who he has grown so much. And I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about his game ever since he arrived on the scene as a freshman. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's finally starting to fill out that lanky 6'9" stature, and he's starting to look like a guy that could go play NBA basketball. And as his shot has improved, his release point has also improved, and he's gotten quicker getting the ball out of his hand and up towards the basket. And we saw him drop 8 3-pointers, a career high in the season-opening win against UTSA. So in Manick and Reeves, you got 2 guys that can carry you to victory on any given night. It can be one or the other. It doesn't necessarily have to be both. Davion Harmon is very much looking like he's a guy that's poised to morph into more of a scorer than a distributor, as he was last year. as a true freshman. Kerqueth has so much potential. I love watching him. I think he's going to be a huge interior presence for Oklahoma this season. This team has some potential, and it's just going to be a matter of finding their groove and staying consistent, which is what they've lacked over the last 3 seasons under Lon Crew, really ever since the Trae Young days. Their highs are very high, their lows are very low. If they can raise the floor, and they can even lower the ceiling, honestly. If they can lower the ceiling and raise the floor, this team is going to be a contender in the Big 12. And maybe they don't have quite what it takes from a physical standpoint to go up against the Titans of college basketball, but this could be a Sweet 16 team when all's said and done. Absolutely.
I don't want to overstate a 2-0 start, but I watched the game kind of out of the corner of my eye while I was on that meeting today, on that Zoom call, and I thought they played well. They answered every run. Everything TCU did, OU did a little bit better. Came back. I think there was a dozen lead changes or something like that, but OU shot 52%. They beat UTSA by 39. Maybe it's possible that we're seeing the beginnings of something special. Like Parker said, Sweet 16, maybe, who knows? We'll see. They're at Xavier next Wednesday in Cincinnati. That'll be fun. Next home game is next Saturday, 4 o'clock, Florida A&M. Listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts, or on your Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast. Or go to allsooners.com, click on the headline that says SI Sooners podcast, then click on the player and listen on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. You can always watch the video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.